Hello, friends. Welcome back. It's Miss Wagers, and we are going to be doing lessons 17 and 18 today. So let's go ahead and get started with our lesson. Today, we are learning to compare and contrast story elements so we can see how authors approach similar themes in different ways. And remember, the theme is the author's main message or lesson in the story. We know we are successful when we can identify the characters, the settings, and the major events of a story. We need to describe the theme of a story and then compare and contrast the elements of the story. So the elements are the characters, settings, and the major events and the themes. So again, comparing is telling how they are the same, and contrasting is to say how they are different. Let's move into our foundational skills. Today we have homographs. And remember that homographs are words that have the same spelling, but different meanings and origins, and sometimes different pronunciations. So that means that you say them differently sometimes, not always though. So let's look at some examples, shall we? So the first example that I have is the wound healed quickly. So you see that word W-O-U-N-D. In this case, we pronounce it wound. And a wound would be like a little ouchie, okay? Like had a little ouchie on my thumb. It's getting a little bit better now. Or I wound the string tightly. So if you wound the string tightly, you are going to wrap it up really tight. So those words are spelled the same way, but they have different meanings and they're pronounced differently. So the wound would be like an injury that you have, or wound would be like wrapping something up tight. And then another example, I used a hammer to pound in the nail. So if I'm going to use a hammer to pound in the nail, we're going to go bang, bang, bang. Probably not in your hand, right? But in the wall, when I'm hanging things up back there, I have to use a hammer to pound in the nail. And the newborn kitten weighs a pound. We're not talking about a pound. We're talking about weight this time, right? So in this case, we have the homographs of the word pound. So they're both spelled the same. So we have pound the nail, and the kitten weighs a pound, but they have different meanings. This time, though, they're pronounced the same. That means that we say it the same. Say pound in both sentences. So for your fluency read, you are going to read camels, ships of the desert, and you just have a couple of homographs. So you have desert, hides, and subject. So have fun with that reading and make sure you take your time and do your best. Let's get into comparing our text today. So the first thing that we are going to do is compare lunch money and Max Malone makes a million. So our first question is, how do Greg and Max share a similar motivation? What motivates both of them? I bet you already know. Stop and think about it. Well, if we look back in the text in lunch money, it says by the time he got to third grade, Greg had set himself a goal. He wanted to be rich. He thought it would be fantastic to be able to spend all the money he wanted anytime he felt like it. If he wanted to get the world's fastest computer plus 100 of the best games, no problem. If he wanted a car, a speedboat, a house in the mountains, a home theater system, or even a whole island out in the middle of the Pacific, plus one in his own seaplane and a private crew to fly him there, no problem. Greg was sure that someday he'd be able to get anything he wanted. All he'd need was money. Right, so what is Greg like? Money, 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 money. Money. Let's think about Max here. Max Malone makes a million. With an air of victory, Max raised his arms and shook his fist the way he had seen the athletes in the Olympics do. Oh, right! Just you wait and see, Mom. We'll make so much money you won't have to sell any more memo pads. Mrs. Malone sold personalized memo pads through the mail. What is Max like? What does he want? Money, 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 money. Money. Right? So they are both motivated by money. Right? Money. So in that way, Greg and Max are the same. So we're comparing, saying how they're the same. All right, now let's contrast our text and see how are Greg's and Max's ideas about making money different. They both like money, but they have some different ideas about making the money. So let's first look at lunch money. The answer came to Greg as the first few days of summer began turning fifth grade into a fading memory. The answer was so simple, and it seemed absolutely foolproof. It would take some hard work if he wanted to have everything ready in September for the start of the sixth grade. But hard work was something Greg had never been afraid of, especially if the rewards were great enough. And he expected the rewards to be astounding. School was like a giant piggy bank loaded with quarters. Greg was convinced that his new product would be like a hammer. Oh, look, a hammer. The perfect hammer. He was going to crack the school wide open. So let's think about, what does Greg think about money? All right, and how to make it. Now let's think about Max Malone. Wow, all he did was buy an old stove and he rented an old shack in his neighborhood where he baked and sold the cookies. Max continued to read to himself until he came to the last line. Oh boy, listen to what it says here. The young man may well be on his way to becoming a millionaire. Max tossed the newspaper onto the couch. Wow, a millionaire! Just by baking and selling chocolate chip cookies. I could do that. He had watched his mother bake cookies lots of times. There was nothing to it. I could get an old stove and rent a shack somewhere. So let's think, how are their ideas about making money different? Let's contrast our text. So on the one hand, we have Greg, and Greg said it's going to take hard work, but Greg had never been afraid of hard work, especially if the rewards were great enough. And then we have Max over here, and he says, all he's got to do is bake some cookies. All you need is that. I could do that, right? He says there's nothing to it. So it seems like Greg is really ready to work hard. He wants to work hard for his money. He's very motivated by it. Whereas Max is like, he's kind of a little bit more lazy or lackadaisical about it. He's like, oh yeah, I could do that, no problem. So he isn't necessarily taking this as seriously. He's not ready to put in all the hard work that Greg is. Max thinks that making money is just going to be easy peasy because that one guy already did it. So we know that good readers can make connections across text by identifying similarities. Let's look for connections between the elements like the settings, the main characters, the key events, and the themes. So I have this table for us here, and we're going to work on filling it out. And I really need you to help me out and work with me on this. Can you help me? So the first thing that we need to do is we need to identify the setting of each of our three stories: Lunch Money, Max Malone Makes a Million, and Coyote School News. So when we're thinking about the setting, remind me, what is the setting again? Right, it's where the story takes place. So remind me again, what is the setting of Lunch Money? Where did that story take place? Think time, think time, think time. Ah, yes. The setting of Lunch Money was at Ashworth School and also at Greg's house. Most of the action took place in those two spots. All right, Max Malone Makes a Million. Where did that story take place? Think time. You got it? All right, let's see. That one also took place at Max's house and in his neighborhood. So we can even see that that's a similarity so far, that both of these stories take place at the main character's house. Interesting. What about Coyote School News? I remember that we focused on the setting in the first lesson of Coyote School News. Let's see how good your memory is. Yeah, it takes place at Monchi's family ranch and also at the Coyote School. And we had taken time to really learn about the Monchi's family ranch. All right, so next we need to think about the main characters. And I really just mean the main characters, because Lunch Money did have lots of characters. So who are our main characters in Lunch Money? Shout them out for me, please. Greg and Mara, right? Greg and Mara, those were our main characters. All right, and in Max Malone Makes a Million, you better have the first one because it's in the title of the story, right? So we have, drumroll please, Max and Gordy. Gordy and Max. And then Coyote School News, who do we have? Monchi. Monchi's really the main character in Coyote School News. So in this case, all of our main characters are obviously different because they are in different stories. Now let's think about some of the key events. What are some of the big things that happened in Lunch Money? Money, 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 money. Sorry, guys, it's stuck in my head today. So, key events, big things that happened. Did you come up with any? You better. Yeah, Greg sells his comic books. He fights with Mara, and then he takes her on as a partner to sell those comics, right? And we could go on because Lunch Money is the longest of these stories that we read, but I just kept it with a few things for that one. Now let's think about Max Malone makes $1 million. What are some of the big things that happened or key events that happened in that story? Well, we know we have Max, and what does Max want to do? Wants to make money, right? So he decides to sell cookies with Gordy, and then he also tries selling some lemonade, right? And then Coyote School News. What happens there? It's not selling cookies, and it's not selling comic books. Yeah, Monchi goes to school and writes for the school paper, right? So again, these have some different events here because again, they are different stories. But where we're really going to compare and see how these stories are alike is thinking about the themes or the author's message, the lesson the authors wanted you to learn from these stories. All right, so let's think about the theme for Lunch Money. What lesson did Andrew Clements want us to learn? And we talked about this in several of our lessons. So do you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking about how Greg and Mara had to really work together to be able to sell their comic books. They had to go to the school committee. They had to come up with a plan. They had lots of challenges, but they could achieve their goals with the help of others. So they ended up having to work together and not against each other. So they had to work together to achieve their goals with help also from like Mr. Xenotopoulos. Okay, now let's think about Max Malone Makes $1 Million. What is the theme there? What lesson is the author trying to get us to learn? Again, Max wants to make money, but he thinks it's going to be a piece of cake. Easy peasy, no problem. So what does he learn there? You got it? Pause if you don't and think about it. That's the best way to learn, is for you to think. Yeah, success takes hard work and planning. Because remember, originally, Max and Gordy, they weren't super successful because they weren't planning anything ahead. The cookies turned out to be a disaster because they're like, oh yeah, let's just throw some of this in and some of this in. They didn't even use a recipe. So again, success takes some hard work and planning, because without that, it might just be a flop. And their cookies were they were a pancake flop. Remember, they were all spread out. And then Coyote School News. So there, Monchi's not trying to make money, but what lesson was the author trying to teach us? We just finished the story, so let's really think about it. What kind of lesson did Monchi learn? So he's writing that school paper with the Coyote School News. Hard work pays off. He really had to work hard, one, to be at school and writing that paper, and then to get that perfect attendance award. Yep. So hard work pays off. So back to our learning intentions. Today, we were learning to compare and contrast story elements so we can see how authors approach similar themes in different ways. Because if you notice, the last 3 stories all had some pretty similar themes about hard work in achieving our goals. So we know we are successful when we can identify the character settings and major events of the story. So we did that in our table. We talked about the characters, the settings, and all of those events. All right, let's check that off. Nice. Describe the theme of a story. We described the theme of all 3 of our stories, and we said that they all had to do with hard work. Check. And then compare and contrast the elements of the story. So we did talk about how those things were the same and how they were different. Nice work, y'all. Check mark. For the last thing of the day, it's your reading response. You said, yes, Miss Wagers, we know, right? Say, get excited. So your question today, on page 92 of Max Malone Makes $1 Million, Max and Gordy find Austin selling lemonade outside the post office. How is this situation similar to one Greg experiences in Lunch Money? I'm thinking about Greg and Mara. All right, and I will include some pages for you to look back on just in case you need to jog your memory. But that is all for today. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Be kind to one another. Do all of your assignments, and I will see you guys next time.